Hello, America. Thank you for joining me today on Jay Slay Made in the USA, where we explore truth, expose deception, and inspire courage. Guys, today I've got a really good friend on the program who really has put herself out there and made some choices to speak truth and stand against the lies of culture. And both on a personal level and professional level, she's had to make sacrifices for it. Tanya Joy Gibson is a former Miss Illinois and the host of the Beauty for Ashes podcast. And she's coming on today's program to discuss both transgender topics and issues that are close to home, as well as what it's like to be canceled. So with that being said, Tanya Joy, thanks for coming on again.
Hey, good to be back. It's
Yeah,
awesome.
it's great to have you. So let's open up with the lighter of the two topics. Recently, they say, it says in the book of Revelation, those who don't take the mark won't be able to buy or sell. And we're hearing all this about the CBDCs, the digital currency, surveillance under the skin. I'm not trying to make this an end times episode, but you're getting canceled just for standing up for what you believe in terms of accessing your own funding.
Yeah, it's really strange. I've heard about this. Obviously, we've done shows on it. I've seen all the clips of Klaus Schwab and Noah Harari and Bill Gates and all of them talking about this new digital currency. And I've read the executive order, that came out last year, and I've seen all these things, but I thought, well, that's only going to impact certain people. I mean, I really thought that. Like, I,
Like,
I
like they
didn't
may go
think,
after General Flynn and Mike Lindell because they're nationally
right,
known figures. You didn't
right.
realize that when you won Miss Illinois, like you were a national figure. They're going to come after you.
Yeah. No. I mean, that was so long ago. I was like, that's not going to really impact me. Um, but it did, and I have been experiencing it. So what they did, um, I'm doing this Esther's Rising event, which is coming up March 4th in Branson. And I mean, it's gotten even, I didn't even tell you this offline because I forgot about this. So what happened was we opened registration. Now this is a Christian event, but it's really just about Esther, and things like that. My Beauty for Ashes, I did create as an LLC. I made it into an LLC because I thought that was probably smart, the way we're operating. I had some people advise me and tell me that that's what I should do. And I did not want to be a 501c3 because I personally am not a fan of 501c3s. I have pretty strong views about that. I've had people reach out to me since and try and talk me out of that and say you should really just be a 501c3. Not doing it
Is that because it
because
might tether you to the government and what they say you have to do?
yeah,
Right.
yeah, exactly. I feel like Christians shouldn't be doing that. I have very strong views about it, but that's how they can come and tell you you can't talk about politics then, or you can't donate to politics, or you can't do any of those things, and I don't want to be under that restriction. So, anyway, I created an
Well,
LLC.
well, you're telling me you couldn't support Joe Biden and be a
Yeah.
501c3?
Yeah, it'd be curious to go look that one up because I
Yeah.
bet that there are
I
lots of
think it only
churches.
applies to one side of the aisle, just to be clear.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
So we opened up registration. This is just a small event, and we had the first few come through. Everything went great. Then all of a sudden, we had 4 or 5 registrations like within 2 minutes come in, and so I got a note first. First, we were using. Let me backtrack. The very first one we went through, it was PayPal. The very
Okay.
very first one,
Yeah.
and PayPal wouldn't said we were not going to release your money for so many weeks. It actually was about 6 weeks. And so I'm like, "Oh, that's not good." So we decided as, a little team, okay, we're not going to use PayPal because they're going to hold it too long and we can't do that. Like why are I've used PayPal for years. I didn't know why all of a sudden they were going to start holding the money, but they were.
Sure.
So I'm like, we can't do that. So we went over to Square and we set that up on the website. And like I said, we had like the first couple come through and then we had a whole bunch. And all of a sudden I got a notice from them saying they needed all of this documentation. I mean, a lot of documentation, details about the event, details about what I was providing, all of this stuff.
Okay.
And I thought, well, okay, maybe because it's an event, I have never done an event, I'll just give them the business information. Who cares? I mean, it's all done correctly, so I don't care,
Yeah.
So I gave them all of that. Within an hour, I got an email that stated your account has been disabled and that the money will not be released until the middle of May, and that, we can't support your business needs. And I'm like,
And that's from
what?
Square.
That was from Square. And so I was like, what in the world? Like, and so I kind of freaked out. Well, then I went to bed early the next morning. I woke up and I had been totally removed off YouTube, whole channel gone, wiped out. And that email says you cannot make another YouTube channel ever again. So I was like, oh my gosh. So then I
Wow.
called,
Yeah.
our good friend Tom Renz, and I was like, what do I do? And he goes, "Yeah, well, I'm not surprised. This is kind of how it's going." He's so chilled out, and he said, "Watch your bank accounts." And I'm like, "My bank account?" Like then I started freaking out cuz then I'm like, "My bank accounts? They could come after my bank accounts,
Yep.
And yes, they can. They absolutely can. And so now since then we found then we went to a third group that we tried to see if we could go direct. And so, because we thought, well, maybe it's because of these pay apps, and they're owned
Right.
by the deep state. Maybe we just need to go direct to like a direct processing group. So we did that. And they were like, I'm sure we'll get you through. The next day, they called and said, we are so sorry. The underwriting had to look at all of your social. I had to give them all my social media. I had to give them my website. No, why does it matter if they have my social media when I'm doing when it's financial interactions? Like that shouldn't have anything to do with it. And they literally said, "Well, we looked at your social media, we looked at your website. It looks like you are talking a lot about religion." I'm like, "Well, I mean, I don't know about a lot, but everything I talk about has a spiritual undertaking because we're in a spiritual war. So yeah,
Yeah.
I do talk about that." And they said, "Well, we're really sorry, but you're not a 501c3." And I said, "No, I'm not going to be a 501c3." "Well, we can't support you." So in other words, you can't talk about religion if you're not a 501c3, but if you are a 501c3, then you can't talk about politics. So that was shocking. And now, since then, we found a third app that I had been using. And so far, they've been good. They haven't shut it down, but now they're shutting my website down. So now, when people go to my website, a Norton antivirus on some computers, Norton antivirus comes up and says, "This is an unsafe website. We do not recommend you going there," and they won't let the person through. Another time, someone went on and it got the error 403, and like as if the website just doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Um, it's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. And so now, I mean, I know that they're shadow banning, they're watching, they're trying to cancel at every opportunity that they can get.
Hmm.
And I hate to say they, like I want to put a name to it, you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
this is why people need to understand all of these organizations are run by a very small group of people,
Yeah.
very small.
And that's
And
that's what's
all
difficult is you're going up against an algorithm that's set up to do this
correct.
so that you can't actually get somebody on the phone to talk through why did, Martha at your office do this? And that
Right.
you can't have that conversation because unless Martha is the name of the algorithm, it's
Yeah.
that's how it's set up so that you don't know who you're fighting.
Right, and that was when Square did this, there was nowhere to go. There was no phone number. I looked it up. There was no phone number. I couldn't respond to the email. It said, "Don't respond to this email." I logged into the account to try and look. I couldn't do anything. It was nuts. It was absolutely nuts.
Yeah, and
So
one
this
thing
is
I want to
real.
say to the viewers as well, because I kind of gotten to understand this game. I've been canceled myself. Now my bank accounts have not been frozen, thank God. But I did change. I changed out of Bank of America. I'm with a local
Yeah.
bank that is not connected at any kind of high level to the big I pyramid in the sky, the
Yep.
international bankers. Um, where was I going with that? I'm gonna have to edit
About
this part.
being canceled.
Yeah. So people would say, okay, why would they pick on you, Tanya Joy? Like
Right.
you're not this huge multi-million dollar company. They'd go after Mike Lindell, but it's got to be something else. But here's what I
Well,
think they're doing. Just like a train derailing in Ohio or, these little things start happening And I think it's algorithmically what they do to dip their toes in the water, get people used to being canceled. So there's a
Yeah.
precedent set. And then as it gets more and more and more, people are just like, oh, yeah, that's how it is. You can't talk about religion if you're not a 501c3. But yet, if you are, you have to do it the government's way. And that's how they take control. So I can see very well how this is happening.
Yeah, and it does seem, when we look across the country and we look at, let's say, all of the pedophilia stuff that's going on,
Yes.
well, we know that's from the tip top. We know that our government's involved. We know that there are very high level, high profile individuals involved in this, but they are not the ones being brought down. The ones that are consistently being brought down, like Disney, for instance, Disney constantly has people that are being arrested for child sex trafficking or pornography or child pornography, and they're all the little people. They're all the workers that are at the front desks or the cashiers. I'm not saying it's right. All I'm saying is that it seems like what they do is they pick off the little people first,
Yeah.
knowing that I don't have a lawyer on retainer that I can call up and be like, all right, hey, send them a letter. I don't have that. I don't have a way of ton of money. I mean, they know. They had to look at my bank. Square, I had to give them all of my banking information, and it said on there, we will be looking like we get full access of your bank.
Wow.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So I think that they go after the little people first, and as tiring it is as this is becoming, it's making me roar a bit louder.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, you come after me. Now I'm going on every single podcast I can, and I'm exposing who you are and telling people not to use you. Don't use PayPal.
Yeah.
Don't use Square.
Yeah. When
I
PayPal made
mean,
their intentions rather clear just a few months ago when they came out and said, "Hey, if you spent, I forget exactly what it was, but it was like over a certain dollar limit. We're going to look at everything, and
yeah,
we have the right."
$600.
Yes, yes. So
Yep. And then they have the right to go in and take, I believe it's up to 2,000 out of your accounts without asking any questions. They can
that,
just
yeah,
go in, and then they reversed it and it disappeared. But then when you dug in and looked under the covers, it was still in their documentation in the back office. They just kind of put it in a different spot so people wouldn't see it.
yeah, they didn't change anything, and that's how prideful
Mm-mm.
these people are. And I think it speaks to people like you and me. Like one thing that I did that I'm glad I did. I mentioned the banking. I changed to a very local bank where I know the banker personally, and I had this discussion with him. I mean, you talk about an awkward breakfast. I'm bringing up the Rothschilds in the 1700s and bringing him to today,
Nice.
and he was like, "What are you talking about, man?" I was just like, "Listen." Trust me on this. But the main thing I was trying to get to was I wanted to make sure that Pinnacle Bank locally was not connected in any level to the international banks or anything where they couldn't make their own decisions.
Yeah.
But I also think from the entire supply chain of our websites, like how we're going to build our website, where's the server at? Who owns the servers? That's something
Yeah.
nobody thinks about. But at the end of the
Mm-mm.
day, all of it matters, all the way from your web designer to where the server's held. And there are
Right.
people that can really help with that. I know a guy that I'll send your way in terms of the website stuff who kind of owns it all. So
Yeah.
yeah,
It needs to, yeah, everything kind of is gonna have to, I don't know, it's very strange. I don't know how some people are not having issues and then other people are. It doesn't make any sense, that's for sure. I think it does depend on the topics you talk about,
yep,
because when we started to really push heavy on the Hollywood side and
yep.
on the pornography side and the pedophilia side and all of these areas, and especially the transgender. I mean, when we started really pushing in and I started speaking, that's a narrative they don't want people to understand
It's too
at all.
important to their liberal new world order. That's what it
Yeah.
is. Yeah, I could go on and on about that. But you mentioned earlier a phrase that I want to latch onto and segue here. You talked about protecting and saving future generations and the children, right?
Mhm.
And I've let me paint a picture. I've got a friend, another ball player that I played professional baseball with. Last season I ever played, I was 29. He was maybe a year younger than me, 28 at the time, but we were on our way out. He's now a coach with a major league organization, doing well. He got a divorce, but he's got a little boy, and his little boy is about 6 years old, and he posts pictures on social media of him and his boy working out and playing baseball and hunting. And this little boy's like all boy, right?
Mhm.
He calls me up a couple weeks ago, and he says, "Jeremy, I need your advice. I need your help because he knows I'm in this world, and I think he respects my worldview. Not sure if he's a Christian or not, but he's like, my son, when he goes and stays with his mom, they put him in dresses. He goes to school and they change his clothes at school, and then his mom's fully supportive. She informed me that she's taking him to gender affirming counseling. So I wanted to go. And he said it was the most blatant indoctrination I've ever seen. It's driving me crazy. I mean, I could tell he was like shaking as he talked to me because he couldn't believe this was real life. And he's like, I've not only got the attorneys against me, I've got the counseling profession trying to
Yeah.
indoctrinate my little boy that has no interest in being a girl, but they're changing his name, like all of these
Yes.
things. And he said his mama hates men right now. She hates me. She hates her father. She hates all these men that have hurt her in her dating years. And this is her way to take it out on her son. And I think that he's probably right. Like I
Oh,
haven't heard her side of the
100%.
story, but I've seen the pictures of this little boy, handsome little boy, dressed up in dresses and pink socks
Yeah.
and girls' shoes. And you're dealing
And
with that right now at
it's
some level. So
abuse. It's
yeah.
mental abuse. These parents, I have really, really strong things about these strong thoughts about this. I don't understand what happened and why these kids are literally not being taken away from parents like that. Like, that mother shouldn't be allowed to see that child as
I
far as
know.
I'm concerned,
It's
because the conflict that's gonna happen in that little boy's mind just from her trying to do this, regardless of whether he gets to the age where he goes, "No, I don't wanna do this," which he will. He will probably get to that stage, and he'll say, "I'm outta here." But the mental trauma and abuse that does, I mean, none of these people should be allowed to be in business. These doctors who are performing, I mean, the story that you share is similar. I had, another gentleman on the show, on my show a couple weeks ago, and he has twin sons. And the sons are 9 now, but when they were 2, the wife started dressing one of them as a girl.
yeah.
Same thing. And that man went all the way to the Texas Supreme Court, and the Texas Supreme Court sided with the mother,
Yeah.
took the parental rights away from the father, and is now allowing them to move to California so that this little boy can have surgery. These
Tanya Joy,
God.
let's pause it. Hold your thought. We're getting really
Okay.
bad signal here.
So the case in Texas with this gentleman, his name is Jeff Younger. People can look him up. It's, there's a lot of information. He's been, I think, even on Tucker Carlson talking about this. But basically, he got his case taken all the way to the Texas Supreme Court, and the Texas Supreme Court sided with the mother, gave the mother full rights to the son. The father basically had his rights stripped as a parent, and the Supreme Court gave the
Mm,
mom the ability to move the boys to California, where now she could have gender reassignment surgery done, because California has basically become a like a sanctuary state to this
yeah.
kind of a thing. Um, and he's left without recourse. His sons have been taken. His son was very similar. In fact, his son, he has it on video when the son was only 3 or 4 years old, saying, "Mommy makes me dress like a girl and I don't like it."
God, it's truly child abuse. And like you said, it's unbelievable that these kids are not taken away from the parents that are abusing them. In fact, it's the opposite. They're taken away from the parent that wants to truly affirm their actual genetic gender. And so
Yeah,
so everything is a lie. And what's even worse, before we had some technical difficulties, you were talking about they'll get that Planned Parenthood wants to give them free
that's
operations, but
right.
it's not free. It's coming from me and you.
From
It's our
our
tax
money.
dollars. So that's
Exactly.
why the Bible talks about a beast system, a
That's
system
right.
that we're involved with, that we hate it, yet we're still involved with it. And the CBDCs are only going to make that worse.
Right. So, yeah, Planned Parenthood, they provided, these are just 2 different cases. An 18-year-old was given 4 times the amount of testosterone over the typical starting dose without a doctor's consent. So, it was just whoever works there, "Yeah, here you go." They gave him 4 times the amount. That's unbelievable. And then a 13-year-old, 13, was fast-tracked through puberty blockers and then given a full mastectomy in less than 2 years without parental consent. 13.
Unreal. It's yeah.
I would yeah, I can't even imagine. Here's another interesting statistic between 2009 and 2019, so 10 years. In the UK, this is where this study was done. The UK saw an 1100% increase in males transitioning and a 4400% increase in females transitioning in a decade.
Yeah, Abigail Schreier. I'll link to this video. She does a talk. I don't know if you got to look her up or not, but she talks about the three. She said what's going on right now is actually three things that is driving gender dysphoria, and one is the classic cases that we've known about for a long time, and that forever. There have been people that have had gender dysphoria where they don't feel
Yeah.
comfortable in their own skin as their natural sex. That's less than 1%, easily less than 1% of the cases. What's really driving this
Yes.
is what she calls the social contagion. That's where
Yeah.
that's what the moms are doing, where they're dressing their little boys in girls' clothing, then affirming them, getting them ice cream. Aren't you happy? Don't you feel pretty? And these little, these boys they're not developed. They want to be affirmed. And then
Well,
last
and
you've
they
got
want the acceptance of their mom and their dad. That's how all
that's right.
children are.
Yeah.
Children need and want the acceptance of their parents, and they need boundaries. I mean, that's like been thrown out the window for the last decade or 2 decades, but human beings as a general population, they need boundaries. It actually makes people feel safer. A child will grow up feeling more secure and more safe knowing that there are boundaries around them. It's something that God
Yeah.
created in us. That is thrown out the window. This whole concept of whatever you want to be, you can be. We've got a high school not even a mile down the road. And there are kids there. There aren't a lot, but there's a couple that identify as cats. They are allowed to come to school with collars and leashes. They crawl the entire day on all fours, and the school has put a litter box. I swear to you, I am
I've
not
heard
making
this.
this
I
up.
didn't know it was down the road from you though.
What? Oh, yeah, this is all over the country, but this is happening at my high school down the road. They put litter boxes in the bathroom for this student. I'm sorry, but see, this is where a part of me wants my kids to go to public school just so I can mess with them, because I'd be calling the school and saying, we have very severe allergies to cats. So that student better never, she must have her own bathroom. She's not allowed to be near my student because my student has allergies. Like, where in the world is common sense? It's gone. It's absolutely gone.
It goes, I go on a lot of podcasts these days talking about this issue because it affects the nuclear family. It affects men,
Yeah.
the whole toxic masculinity thing. But it goes back to one thing, the original temptation of Satan, of the serpent in the garden. He said, you won't die. You'll be like God. You can overthrow his power and not have any of his boundaries. And we see that happening with, you talk about boundaries. The only people they're trying to put boundaries around, in your case, the financial boundaries, are the people who want God's natural order. That's it. That's the only boundaries they care about, locking you out from their free for all to subjugate God's order.
That's right. And, I think that it's important because the devil's plan is to steal, kill, or destroy, or all three, really. He wants to do all three. So if he can steal a child's identity, he then can steal their destiny.
Yeah.
And then he now has taken what God created them to be on the earth for. So I believe, Satan has been after the seed of man since the beginning of time. And this is just the new way he's going at it. And all these people are just so deceived. They don't know the word. I'll tell you, I have so many Christian parents when I talk about this and share my personal story that come up to me afterwards, and they're going through the exact same thing, and they don't want to lose their kid, and so they're afraid to say anything, and they'll say to me, well, God will take care of it. We just need to love them. If your child had an addiction to cocaine and you knew that was potentially going to kill or harm your child, would you sit back and go, we're just going to love them and God will take care of it? If your child was an alcoholic, would you sit back and go, God will take care of the addiction. We're just going to love them through it. If your child was going out and robbing stores, doing things that are against God's natural way, would you just let them do it? The Bible is so clear
Yeah.
that men, basically God turned, I've got to look this up. There's this whole Bible verse. I think it's in Romans. It's New Testament, and it's where God basically it's Romans 1:24, and it says, so God abandoned them to do whatever shameful things their heart desired. And as a result, they did vile, oops, I just lost it. Hold on. Sorry. They did vile and degrading things with each other's bodies. They traded the truth about God for a lie. And that is why God abandoned them to their shameful desires. And it flat out says the women turned against the natural way to have sex and instead indulged in sex with each other. And the men, instead of normal sexual relations with women, burned with lust for each other. And then it says, as a result of this sin, they suffered within themselves the penalty they deserved. This is the Bible. Like, this